You remember the first time you saw Augusta National on television. You were 7 years old, sitting on the living room floor in your socks, eating cereal out of the box because it was Sunday morning and your father was in his chair and the television was showing something green and quiet and impossibly beautiful. The kind of green that does not exist in real life, the kind that only exists in places where extraordinary amounts of care and attention and money have been applied to every single blade of grass for decades. Your father did not explain what you were watching. He did not need to. You understood immediately that this was somewhere important, somewhere that mattered in a way that most places did not. The men walking across that grass walked differently than men walked in other places, slower, more deliberate, like every step carried weight, like the ground itself demanded a certain kind of reverence from everyone who touched it. You asked your father what the place was called. Augusta National, he said, without looking away from the screen. You said it back to yourself quietly, Augusta National. The words felt important in your mouth, like the name of somewhere you were supposed to know, somewhere you were supposed to care about. You sat there for the rest of the afternoon, watching men in colored shirts hit small white balls across that impossible green, and you did not fully understand the rules or the scoring, or why some shots made the crowd gasp and some made them cheer, and some made them fall into that particular reverent silence that only happens when something extraordinary has just occurred in front of people who understand exactly how extraordinary it is. But you understood one thing completely. You wanted to be there someday. Not watching, playing. You picked up a club for the first time 3 weeks later, a hand-me-down 7-iron that belonged to your uncle and was 3 inches too long for your 7-year-old body. You stood in the backyard on a Saturday morning and swung it at a plastic ball and missed completely, and swung again and missed again, and on the third swing made contact with a sound that was nothing like the sound on television, but was real and was yours and was the beginning of something you did not yet have the words to describe. You were not a natural. That is the thing about this story that matters most. You were not the kid who picked up a club and immediately showed promise. You were not the kid the coaches noticed or the parents talked about or the other kids watched with that particular mixture of admiration and envy that follows genuine talent wherever it goes. You were ordinary. Genuinely and completely ordinary. The kind of kid who improved slowly and inconsistently and spent more time looking for lost balls in the rough than hitting fairways in regulation. But you loved it. You loved it with a completeness that had nothing to do with being good at it. You loved the feel of the club in your hands, and the smell of the grass in the morning, and the particular silence that existed on a golf course that existed nowhere else in your life. You loved the way a well-struck shot felt different from the hands all the way up through the shoulders, the way time seemed to slow down in the half-second between impact and knowing whether the shot was good. You loved the honesty of it. Golf did not lie to you. It did not give you credit for trying or points for effort or sympathy for bad luck. It simply showed you the number every time, without judgment but without mercy. You played through middle school on a municipal course that was nothing like Augusta National, patchy fairways and slow greens, and a clubhouse that smelled like old carpet and fried food. You played after school and on weekends, and during summers when other kids were at the pool or playing video games, or doing the things that teenagers did when they were not obsessing over a sport that required more patience than most adults possessed, let alone most children. Your game improved, slowly, inconsistently. 2 steps forward and 1 step back, the kind of improvement that is invisible from week to week but undeniable from year to year. You broke 90 for the first time at 13 and stood on the 18th green with the card in your hand and felt something you had not felt before, not just satisfaction, something deeper, the specific satisfaction of a goal pursued over a long time finally arriving. The understanding that the distance between where you started and where you were standing had been covered not in a single leap, but in thousands of small, ordinary moments of practice and patience and showing up again the day after a bad round and the day after that and the day after that. You broke 80 at 15. You made your high school team. You were not the best player on the team, third or fourth, depending on the tournament, good enough to contribute, not good enough to carry. The coach saw something in you that was not about your swing or your short game or your putting. He said it once after a tournament where you had played well on a difficult course in difficult conditions, while some of the more talented players on the team had fallen apart. He said, "You know how to suffer." You did not understand what he meant until years later. What he meant was that you had developed, through all those ordinary hours on that ordinary municipal course, a relationship with difficulty that most people never develop. You did not panic when things went wrong. You did not compound one bad shot with another by letting the frustration of the first one contaminate the decision-making of the second. You had learned through thousands of hours of the game being harder than you wanted it to be, that the only shot that mattered was the next one, not the one you just hit, not the one you should have hit, the next one, clean, present, committed. That understanding would become the foundation of everything. You earned a golf scholarship to a university you had not expected to attend, not the biggest program, not the one with the most resources or the deepest history or the alumni network that opened doors before you even knocked on them, but a good program, a serious program, one that took a kid from a municipal course and a hand-me-down 7-iron and gave him 4 years to find out exactly what he was made of. The first year nearly broke you. Not dramatically, not with a single catastrophic failure, just the slow accumulating weight of being the least talented player in a field where everyone had been the most talented player in their previous field. Every player on that team had been the best at their high school. Every player had records and trophies and coaches who had said extraordinary things about their potential. And now they were all in the same place, competing for the same spots, and the gap between the talented and the exceptional was visible in a way it had never been visible before. You were not exceptional. You knew it. The coaches knew it. The other players knew it in the way that athletes always know the hierarchy of their environment, even when nobody says it out loud. You were good. You worked hard, you had that quality the high school coach had identified, you knew how to suffer, but suffering was not the same as winning, and in collegiate golf, winning was the only currency that mattered. You almost quit at the end of your first year, sitting in your dorm room in April with a season that had been adequate and nothing more behind you, and another 3 years of the same gap between yourself and the players above you ahead of you. You sat with that for a long time. The question of whether continuing to pursue something you loved but were not exceptional at was rational, whether the time and energy and sacrifice had a reasonable return, whether the 7-year-old on the living room floor in his socks had been chasing something real or chasing something that was always going to belong to someone else. You called your father. He listened to everything. The whole season, the whole struggle, the whole calculation about whether to continue. He listened without interrupting, which was not something he did often. And when you finished, he said something that you have thought about almost every day since. He said, "The green jacket is not given to the most talented player. It is given to the player who is standing on the 18th green on Sunday afternoon. Your job is to be standing." You went back for your second year. You changed your approach, not your technique, not your swing, your approach. You stopped measuring yourself against the players above you and started measuring yourself against the player you had been 6 months ago. You stopped trying to close a gap that had been built over years in a single season and started trying to close it one shot at a time, one round at a time, one practice session at a time. You became almost scientific about your own game, identifying the specific weaknesses that were costing you the most strokes and addressing them with a precision that had been absent in your first year, when you were trying to improve everything at once and improving nothing completely. Your short game transformed over the course of that second year, not dramatically, incrementally, the way everything real transforms. A slightly better chip shot here, a slightly more consistent putting stroke there, the ability to get up and down from places that used to cost you a stroke starting to become reliable rather than occasional. The strokes saved on the short game showed up in the scorecard before they showed up anywhere else. You went from averaging 78 to averaging 74 without your long game changing meaningfully. 4 strokes found not in hitting the ball further or straighter, but in wasting fewer shots around the green. Your coach noticed. He moved you up in the lineup, not to the top, but up. The acknowledgement was small, but it meant something. It meant the approach was working. It meant that the decision to go back for the second year rather than quit at the end of the first had been the right one. Not because the outcome was guaranteed, because the alternative, quitting, guaranteed a different outcome entirely. Your junior year brought the first real breakthrough, a tournament in late September on a course that suited your game, long rough that punished the big hitters who were less precise and rewarded the players who could manage their misses and manufacture scores from difficult positions. You shot 68 in the first round, your best competitive round. You stood on the 18th green after making a 12-foot par putt to finish and felt the number settle into you. 68. Real, undeniable, yours. You did not win the tournament. You finished 4th, but 4th in a field of that quality at that stage of your development was not 4th. It was proof. Proof that the gap was closable. Proof that the 7-year-old on the living room floor had not been chasing something that belonged exclusively to other people. Proof that the question was not whether you could get there. The question was whether you were willing to do what getting there actually required. You were. Senior year brought the kind of golf that felt different from anything that had come before it. Not because your swing had changed dramatically or your physical gifts had suddenly expanded, because something inside you had settled. The anxiety that had accompanied every competitive round for your entire career, the noise, the self-doubt, the running commentary of everything that could go wrong had quieted, not disappeared, quieted. Moved to the background where it belonged instead of occupying the foreground where it had lived for years. You played with a freedom that confused people who had watched you play before. The same player who had been tight and careful and conservative was now aggressive in the right moments and patient in the right moments and completely present in every moment in a way that looked effortless from the outside but had been built through years of the opposite of effortless. You graduated. You turned professional. Not with fanfare, not with a sponsor already in place or a manager making calls or a clear path to the tour waiting for you. You turned professional the way most professionals turn professional. Quietly, with a bag and a schedule and the understanding that the gap between collegiate golf and professional golf was as large as the gap between high school golf and collegiate golf had been. You were starting over, again, at a higher level, with better players, with higher stakes, with no scholarship protecting you from the financial reality of trying to make a living at something that most people who tried to make a living at it could not. The first 2 years on the mini tours were the hardest years of your life. Not because of the golf, because of everything around the golf. The travel, the expenses, the prize money that